You're listening to Brandon Sports Talk, interviewing professional athletes and Paralympians and Olympians. And now for your professional athlete interview and your host, Brandon P.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the USA Paralympian para rower, Laura Goodkind. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in competing in rowing?
Yeah, sure. So it's a bit of a story. I've always been an athlete. And in 2013, I developed swallowing disorder. I got really sick. I was living abroad in Denmark, and nearly died from it. I had septic shock. I had sepsis twice. And when I came back, I was seeing a dietitian here, and she was like, you need to get involved with people more like you. And I was like, what do you mean? Isn't everyone a little bit weird? She's like, no, I mean and I was like, oh, like you mean crippled? Because I was like really into like the shock factor. And she's like, yes, I mean physical disability. I was like, okay, well, all I know are like sports and support groups. And at the time I was not into support groups because I was like, if you have one negative person, it could bring the entire group down. So I was like, I'm gonna do sports. And she's like, well, you're not well enough to do sports. You know, my vitals weren't stable. Like, she's just like, it's not like you're no. And I was like, well, I'm not doing a support group, so we need to compromise. And so basically I decided to do a Paralympic sport club search, did a wide radius of the search and found whatever sports I might be interested in. There were a few that I thought, well, I can't do that because I thought they were gendered, and they're not, but Wikipedia was wrong, and I didn't know that at the time. And so I was like, rowing seems cool. Like way back when my mom was like, you should be a rower, like your arms are so strong. And I come to find out, like rowing is actually very much like if you're able-bodied, 60% lower legs. So my legs are not strong. And so but it just so happens I'm in a category you don't use your legs. And so basically, I went rowing. First 7 months I was using my legs because people running it thought, well, you can walk, you can use your legs. And turns out I have CP. I can't coordinate upper and lower body at my will. And so I am in a category where I don't use my legs. But that's how I got into rowing, all from that.
What was that like, obviously getting into the sport of para rowing and competing in rowing?
Well, it was very frustrating the first 7 months because, like I said, it was using my legs, and I always felt like this boat is not moving, and I feel like I'm a lot stronger than this. I don't understand why it's not moving. But as soon as I went to a camp in Boston and they realized, oh, we don't think I went to a camp that was actually sorry, one moment. Okay. Back. Okay. So I went to, can you see me? Okay, cool. I went to a camp in Boston that was for a developmental PR3s, which is using your legs. And it was there that they were like, oh, we think you're the category you don't use your legs. You need to go get classified. So it was all summer 2015, and I got classified. I also went to my first race in Philadelphia. And I knew it was where I was going to have two races that day. And I knew I needed to get first or second in order to get like straight through the final. So I did my first race, and I had the worst start. I was dead last, and then I just started rowing through a lot of people, and I was like, cool, I'm in second place. Like, I just need to hold this, stay in second place. I'm good. So I held it, and I crossed the line, and I realized I had actually gotten first by about 45 seconds. And I was like, oh, cool. So later that day, I would have the final, but I had to have a completely different boat, completely different oar setup, and it was like shorter oars. And I was like, well, this is not what I should be using, but it's what is available. So I used that, and I ended up overall getting second in the race. And that's when the high performance director at the time, Tom Darling, he approached me. He said, "So Rio?" And I was like, "It's a year away. Is there really time?" And he's like, "I think so. I think we can fast track you." So that's how I got into it.
Of course, what was that feeling like making the national team and representing Team USA?
So making the national team was a little bizarre because we had just had a PR2, that's the category I am. We had just had a camp in Florida. So a bunch of us got paired up, like males and females got paired up with each other. We kind of did like, I think it's like hot seat racing, right? To see who would pair best with one another. And we kind of knew I was the fastest woman, but we didn't really know who the fastest man was. And so then I ended up having to choose, and I chose one person, Hellman, and then so basically trials were a month after that. And at that point, people very much knew that like whoever was going to be paired with me was going to be the fastest. So it was uncontested, and they had to put on a special trials for us because the regular like senior team trials were happening a few weeks later, and we still needed to try to qualify the boat for Rio. So we had to get to Italy for a race. So our trials were freezing cold. There was snow outside. It was put on just for us, and we were uncontested. So that's why it was quite bizarre. But then we went to Italy to try to qualify. So we won trials because uncontested, and then we went to Italy. And that's where we tried to qualify the boat for Rio. And in this particular regatta, it's kind of referred to as Death Row Regatta because it is cutthroat, and it is only the top 2 boats in every class get to go, fill the final spots for Rio. And we didn't do it. We actually got third by 1.69 seconds. And it was a huge, huge letdown. Like, very, very sad. Tons of training, just felt like, oh, darn. Then they were like, "Do you want to apply for a wild card?" And we were like, "Of course we do. Like, who wouldn't?" But every other US boat had made it to Rio for the para division. And so odds were we weren't going to get it, and we didn't get it. And so that we found that out in June. And then in July, we got maybe in June, the world got wind of Russia, right? Being like the scandal, the doping scandal. And it was like, oh, wait, what? Like, and then the International Olympic Committee was like, all right, well, for Russia, like every sport delegation can decide for their athletes what they want to do. And we were just like, well, this is unprecedented territory. The IPC, International Paralympic Committee, is probably going to determine the same thing. And they didn't. They said, Russia, you're completely out. That still left it up to the sport delegations to decide what to do with like other athletes. Do they want some sports and some categories were like, no, we don't want to fill, the void. And some were like, absolutely. It was early August 2016 that we got a call from Tom, the high performance director. And he was like, hey, so we got offered a spot for your boat for Rio. Do you guys want it? And we were like, yes. But remember, at this point, we haven't been training together probably like 4 months, and we weren't going to get to train together because he lived in Florida and I live in California. So it was just going to be, we're going to meet up in Rio and, try our best. Like, of course, we were training on our own, but it's a double. So it's a lot better when you can be with your partner to train.
Of course, what was that feeling like getting to make your first Paralympics to go to Rio in 2016?
It was a massive shock because it was such a roller coaster of emotions leading up to it, thinking, oh, I have a shot, after the race in Philly, to like, oh, I really have a shot making the national team. So like, oh, 1.69 seconds we lost, we didn't get it. That was like, oh my gosh, very huge letdown, very sad. And then wild card, even more frustrated. And then making it was like, I was just standing there, just like absolute shock.
Of course, once you got to Rio and you got to experience that moment in your boat in the Paralympics, what was that feeling like, getting to know that all of your hard work and your dream paid off?
It was completely surreal. Because a really big, like, I guess, undertone of my life situation at that time was I was actually homeless. And so there was not a lot, like I was in a very, low spot of my life. So to be able to be like, I am homeless and somehow made it all the way to Rio. And I'm definitely one of the top rowers in the world, like in my class, is wow. Like it was absolutely surreal and just really cool to be around these people who I had been learning about over the past year or two. Just learning about them and being like, whoa, like this was somebody I looked up to and now I get to row against them. This is amazing. So it was pretty incredible.
While at Rio, what were some of your favorite memories and moments competing in Rio?
Um, this setting was absolutely gorgeous. We did not have a remote village. That's where they take, if there's a sport that competes very far away from like the Olympic Paralympic village, they might set up a remote, housing situation. And we didn't have that. Instead, we had like a 2-hour bus drive, and we would drive through what felt like what might have been the rainforest, leading into like just like beautiful ocean views, and then to our little, was it Lake Como? That's what I want to say, but I'm not sure if that's what it was called. The one where like Christ the Redeemer overlooks the entire lake. It's like, that's what like I see in pictures. Wait, I'm actually here. So that, I mean, it is beautiful scenery. The people were incredible. They were cheering for us as the US team as much as they were for Brazil. So we felt like incredibly supported.
While at Rio, what were some of your biggest accomplishments competing in Rio?
I would say the accomplishment was like learning that I could put like all of my energy and focus into a race and finish it knowing that I gave it everything I have. And also learning that like 100% of my effort like isn't like I could give 100% today, but like as I got stronger and stronger, my 100% would change, and it would like, and that would be shown in my times, in our race times. So just really figuring all that out was a big part.
What was it like, obviously, getting to compete in 2017 in the World Championship?
2017 was the first, yeah, it was the first year that we actually, World Rowing decided, let's now combine para and senior team. That's the able-bodied team. Let's combine them and at a world championship. In order to make that easier, that might not have been the first time we were combined. It was the first time, though, that they said, senior team and para, you are both rowing 2K. So that was a very new experience to row 2K versus 1K. And there's a lot more stamina required. And also I had a new partner who I had been training with a lot over the summer. So going into that, it was really interesting because I thought, oh, we have a shot. But also that was right around one of the bad hurricanes that happened in Florida. And I felt a little guilty being there because I knew that the town we were in didn't have power, but somehow they were getting power for us. And like all these international people, rather than saying, hey guys, we need to postpone or cancel the event, like they were like, no, we'll put it on for you guys. Like, but your people in this town, like they need support too. And so it felt like a little unfair that they were supporting us as athletes when like, the human condition was suffering around us.
What was your experience like going into the 2018 World Championship?
2018, I was in a really not great spot in my life. I had been recently diagnosed with a condition where I basically would have anaphylaxis at any moment with anything. And so I was on a lot of meds, and those meds really changed my mood, and it also changed the shape of my body, and I also gained a lot of weight. And so I felt really just uncertain about myself. And that year I didn't have a partner. So my coach at the time, Ron, who rode in 2008 and 2012 as a PR1, my coach Ron Harvey, he offered so generously to row with me, because you can row up like into the a less disabled category in rowing. So I felt very grateful to have the opportunity to be there, and also felt just very uncertain and really just not confident.
Of course, what was that experience like, obviously getting to row with your coach who had that experience previously in 2 previous Paralympics?
He was the best coach that I've had in rowing, and I've had quite a few. So I just felt really honored to be able to be in the same boat as him, because I never thought that that would happen. At practices, we would row alongside each other in our singles, and so until we decided we were going to be partners. So to be in the same boat with him, it was such a huge honor, because he's just such a humble guy and so sweet, and also just so experienced. Before his accident, that when he became disabled, before that, he actually was an able-bodied rower and went to Olympic trials, let's say in the 90s or so. I might be very off on those dates. And he was actually like 8th at trials, which is really good for the category that he was aiming for. So he's been a top world-class rower, for quite some time. And so to be in the same boat with him was just that part was really offset the other negative experiences that I felt there.
Following the 2019 World Championship, what were some of the things that you were preparing to make your second Paralympics?
So I had a new partner. This is a guy who was a PR3 and was reclassified to be a PR2, I believe in 2019. Yeah, at the World Championships, he got reclassified. So there was a lot of uncertainty. Is he going to get classified? Because you never know. Like, they could maintain that you're in the same class that you were in. And so it was incredible that we made it. We were the top 8 get to make it, and we were the 8th, and it was the best race of my life. That is where that 100% that I was talking about, that's where I understood, oh, I have a new 100% now. And so after 2019, I realized, oh, I have my meds had gotten rearranged. I had gotten into way better shape, and I was like, oh, we really have a shot at the podium for Tokyo. It was a brand new realization, mindset, mode that I had within me after 2019 to be like, this is possible. We can do this.
What were some of the things that you took from your time at the Paralympics in Rio in 2016 to help you to make the Paralympics in 2021 to go to Tokyo?
So one of the things that was really incredible was the village life. For the first time in my life, I felt like I don't have to hide my disability. You see people pushing, athletes helping each other out, athlete pushing someone in a wheelchair. That athlete doesn't have arms. The one who's pushing the athlete, who doesn't have legs. That was a really cool experience for me to realize, I can be who I am here. And so that was a really big motivator for me to be like, I want to be back there. I want to be back in a place where I feel completely welcome and not judged, and not in a place where people think I'm drunk, because I'm tired and I'm walking it looks like I'm drunk, or even just not when I'm tired, right? I don't have to try. And so that was a huge motivator for me. And the other motivator was Rio was complete luck in a sense. I mean, yes, there was a lot of hard work, and also it was luck. Russia got out. I felt like I very much earned the spot. My partner and I earned the spot for Tokyo, and so it was just a different experience from Rio, where it was like, oh, this is just, we're just so grateful to be here, versus we earned our chance to be here. And so I really wanted to flip the I was still grateful, but I really wanted to be like, well, I'm just grateful to be here. Let me just try. It doesn't matter what we get. Whereas Tokyo was like, no, we're aiming for the podium.
Of course, what was that feeling like getting to go to the Paralympics in 2016 in Rio with your family and friends, where in 2020, with due to COVID, they weren't able to come?
So I actually didn't feel terribly affected because I didn't know I was going to have family and friends supporting me in Rio until like about a week before. My mom and her best friend, flew down unexpectedly. I'm a person, I don't know if this is like this for a lot like others, but I'm someone who has a lot of like intrinsic motivation. So the crowd, whether it's there or not, it doesn't really impact me. And the other component of that is rowing is a very physically demanding sport. It takes a lot from the body, and that I think also means that it takes a lot from, of oxygen and whatnot. I barely ever hear the crowd because I'm so focused on what I need to do to breathe and what I need to do, to have that next stroke and match my partner. And so the crowd and the support, it honestly, it doesn't impact me. A lot of Team USA people, athletes were still there, come back to the village, and I was with the whole rowing team in our suite. So I didn't feel particularly impacted by the lack of people being present in stands or not.
What was that feeling like, obviously getting to row on the Paralympic stage and in the waters at the Paralympics?
Um, the feeling, there's not really any way to describe it. I think the way that I would describe it is like just the water itself for me has, one of the reasons I think I excel in the sport is the water is so calming for me. So being able to, be in a new location that's beautiful and might present its own challenges, whether it's, salt water or dirty water, as was the case in Rio, or very hot. It was very hot in Tokyo. Just getting to be there, like, I'm not sure I would necessarily see it as, we don't get that many races to compete in anyway. So it was like, oh, like I just want to take advantage of this moment and compete in this race and do the best that I can. So there wasn't necessarily a new feeling. There was more, if anything, it was just a more determined feeling.
Of course, going into Tokyo, what was that feeling like, obviously having one Paralympics under your belt and the jitter of going to the Paralympics over?
The jitter was not really there, but I will say what was there was, the pandemic really messed with a lot of training plans. So we were expecting, right, it would be in 2020, and there was a lot of training that went into that, which was abruptly halted because you weren't allowed to row in a boat with more than one person unless you were, in the same family. So I just feel like it wasn't necessarily that there were jitters. There was actually more frustration, especially because we knew that the US had a lot more like regulations during lockdown than other countries, and we were very limited. So I was very frustrated that, I knew these countries had been able to train together pretty much the entire time, and we hadn't, and it was like, it felt like it felt like a missed opportunity, like a lost opportunity that was quite unfair.
Of course, what were some of your favorite memories and moments competing in Tokyo?
Tokyo, the people, again, they were so kind in a different way. And there was, when we arrived at the venue, there was a really sweet drop-off area where there were tons of plants. And we found out one day they were like writing, there were notes on these plants, and we were like, what is this? So we looked into it, and it turns out like the local elementary schools like basically wrote notes and drew pictures to wish us luck and to welcome us there. And the food was delicious. Like it just it has such an awesome vibe in Tokyo. I wish that I had the opportunity to stay there a little longer and tour. COVID restrictions again, like, didn't happen, but like, it's a really cool city with, that's constantly bustling, and so much. What was also cool is our village was basically right in the center of Tokyo on the water, and we had like the Japanese Coast Guard like guarding the village. So at night they would have signs on on the Coast Guard boats that were just basically like it was stuff that didn't translate necessarily all that well into English. It was just basically like you are safe, stay safe. It's like just cool, but messages that felt like, oh, like you care about us, like you want to protect us, like this is cool. And it was just a gorgeous view of the city. Like I think we got one of the best suites. It was a corner suite, and so we had like, you know, panoramic views of the city, and the venue was right near this really huge the rowing venue was right near this huge transport bridge with massive what is it called, like container ships that I mean, it was unreal that we got to be in the middle of all this. It was a very unique experience.
What was that feeling like, obviously getting to receive your Paralympic gear and having the Argonauts symbols on your Paralympic gear?
The first time in 2016, it was a little bit strange in the sense that I was never really supported to go and do adaptive sports as a kid. I was always doing basically non-adapted sports, and so I always thought about, like, I want to be an Olympian. And so seeing the symbol and being like, wait, I don't get the rings, what? Was a bit like I had to shift my mind quite a bit to like embrace those. I won't say that it happened immediately. So that's where it was very confusing. And there were some companies who decided to still give us Olympic stuff despite us being Paralympians. And so it was just very confusing. It was a bit of a mixed message. And like, oh, you can print Olympic stuff, but you can't print Paralympic stuff. So in 2016, it was definitely a lot to sort through in my mind. In 2021, for the 2020 games, we didn't actually have a place to go through for processing. In 2016, we got to go through Houston before we went to Rio. But in 2021, again, because of COVID, there was no processing to get our gear. So our gear just was there for us in our rooms. And I would say, like, Nike is incredible in that we fill out these forms ahead of time, you know, what our sizes are, all this and that. And I identify as Nutois, which is basically like not a guy or a girl, but I feel like there's like a third gender out there, and that's how I identify. So another component is like, I don't want tight fitting, you know, outerwear. And so I request from Nike, like, or I request from Nike and Ralph Lauren, like, men's sizing. Nike on point both years, like, just had it for me ready. Incredible. And it just wasn't an issue. Ralph Lauren, both years, despite me writing it, just kept giving me women's stuff. And I was worried because we weren't allowed to trade it out in 2021 because of all the COVID stuff. And I went to the USOPC office and I was like, excuse me, I wasn't supposed to get women's gear. And they were incredible. They fixed it. But it was definitely like, I want to wear your stuff, but I don't want to wear stuff that, like, I don't feel comfortable in. So once I got the gear that I felt comfortable in, it was like, okay, I'm proud now. Like, I'm a proud Paralympian, right? Like, it's cool to get to wear this. Like, I want to wear it now, as opposed to like, do I want to wear this? Are people going to question it? Special Olympics? Like, it's not a bad thing, but I want them to know that's not what I'm competing in. I'm competing in a different level. So definitely completely different experiences both times.
What does it mean to be a Paralympian and a para rower?
It means that I've you know, put my all into my sport and get to compete on the biggest stage in the world and show my talents, and, you know, my effort gets to be watched by, you know, a lot of people. I get to prove to myself how well I can do. And it's not in spite of a disability, it's like with a disability, because that's not going to disappear. It's going to be there, and it's nice to be able to, it's more than nice, it's incredible to be able to show people, like, you can do things if you put your mind to it. Yes, I have disabilities, and not yes, I have disability, but so it's a good feeling for sure.
Of course, for you, what does that mean to be represented by a select few that is Paralympians and Olympians?
It's a really cool feeling. I know I remember the first time that I was a Paralympian in 2016. I was like, I wonder how many there are. And then I kind of was like, I bet there aren't as many, or I bet there are way more doctors than like Paralympians and Olympians. Sure enough, like according to Google, there are. And so I felt like, oh, yeah, that's right, doctors. Yeah, you might think you're special, but like we have something that not a lot of people get to experience. And I don't like. It's not something that I want to brag about. It's just something that is just a really a really great aspect of my life that I get to share with other people.
What is that feeling like, obviously having Paralympian behind your last name and adding the PLY?
That was completely unexpected. When they sent me an email like, hey, you can have initials behind your name, I was like, what? I'm not that fancy. And I was like, who's gonna understand this? I don't even know if I got an email from somebody that said like OLY, I think that's their abbreviation. Like, I'm not sure I would have been like Ollie, what? And so I'm like, that's cool. And who's gonna understand that except athletes, like, or people who are just really, into sports. I was like, I hope eventually one day this is going to be recognizable and it won't be questioned. Because currently I think people are like like plywood. So I hope that it does become a much more recognized initials behind the name eventually.
What was that feeling like when you received your Paralympic rings and you found that the US flag and the Argonauts symbols were on both rings?
Um, I've had issues with the rings. First one was very delayed, so uh, I think when I got it, it was more like, oh, it's finally here, and it was what I think was cool about it is that I got to emboss it, like get it engraved with what I wanted to get engraved with, like how I wanted my name to be on it. That part was really cool to see alongside the symbol and USA. Like I was like, oh, this is actually like something. I'm still waiting on the one from 2020, so I'll get back to you on that.
What is it like, obviously, getting to meet your fans and having them ask for your autographs and recognize you and have photos with you?
I think um, like rowers, maybe I'm being too general when I say this. It's just not as recognized like as a sport or with athletes. But I will say when I go to schools and I get to talk to kids and they can then associate, oh, you're an athlete, like at a high level, and then they want my autograph. I think that's the cutest thing, and I feel really honored because I'm like, I didn't bring a Sharpie or like, but also like some years they've given us trading cards of ourselves, and I'm like, well, good thing I have these, I guess. Like it's just, I think it's it's also a pretty surreal experience because I always just think like I'm an athlete who does something well. I don't think of it as like, oh yeah, like you should have my autograph for that. So it's really heartwarming when people ask for it.
What is that like, obviously, as a professional athlete and a Paralympian, to have a trading card with your photo and, let's say, your stats on it?
It is interesting because when I think of rowing, I don't necessarily think like, oh, we have stats. Like it's not baseball, basketball, etc. So it's always it was a bit like, oh, you guys made this for us, cool. And also it was like, wait a minute, that's not my height, that's my weight. Where did you get these from? So it's kind of funny, and then it makes me think like, oh, I wonder if all these trading cards I had as a kid are accurate.
Of course, what are some of your favorite memories and moments competing in para rowing?
2019 World Championships where we qualified that boat. That was incredible because I remember thinking at around the 500, I remember glancing over and seeing a lot of us were very, very close to one another. And when I watched the footage later, it turns out we were, and the like announcers were even like, oh, they're neck and neck, like the bow balls were just interchanging, by millimeters every stroke, or not millimeters, just a little bit every stroke. So I was like, there's no way, like, I don't want this to be, because it was Russia who initially we were, neck and neck with in 2019. I was like, no, they're not going to get this again. Like, absolutely not. So to just realize that I could push myself deeper and farther than I ever had before was an incredibly memorable experience, because it's a translatable skill to more than just sports. And or also to other sports that I'm now pursuing. So that's definitely a huge, huge memory. As is, the memory of like losing by 1.69 seconds, because it's not something I'm gonna forget, and it's something that's always gonna have me, push a little bit more each time. I think there's so many great memories. Even the first time that I went rowing, and the first many weeks that I was rowing, where I rowed, we didn't have a launch following us, a boat following us for safety. We rowed at night, and we rowed around an island that's right near the ocean. And I rowed very slowly initially, but my bow ball definitely hit a bunch of big yachts. I felt like I was going bowling. But I think one of the coolest experiences I had early on in rowing, one night there's a rule where you can row as long as it's not white capping. So that's where like the top of like the wave, or the little, wave, if you will, is so strong that it's white. Like that means that the winds are really strong, the water's messy. So the rule where we row, you can't row if there's white caps. And so one night it was raining, it was so windy, and my coach couldn't row that night because he forgot his workout clothes. So he comes and we both look over the dock, and he's like, well, it's not white capping. Do you want to row? And I was like, yeah, I drove like 2 hours. I do. And so I did, but I was completely alone, and and I didn't really understand the pathway that we rode around. Like I still didn't understand like how close we were to the ocean. I was so close that I could be blown out, and I pretty quickly, I would say within 20 minutes, when I was actually relatively close to the ocean, but there were a few turns, I realized like, oh, I can't row the way I normally row, like, or I am going to be like blown out to sea or tipped over, and no one's here to rescue me. Like, I need to change what I'm doing. And so I changed my stroke. I made it shorter, more precise. And it took a while to get around, but I got around, and it was just such a lesson of like I can't control the environment around me. I can control how I respond to it, right? That's applicable to weather, to people. So that was the biggest lesson I've learned in rowing, and it's very translatable.
What has it been like, obviously, getting to compete alongside some of your teammates like Allie Riley and Haley Smith?
So, to be honest, I don't know Allie that well. She's friendly. We've been in occasional suite mates. Hallie, we were together for a few times as roommates. She's really fun. And getting to see her, get third place in 2018 was definitely like, in that year, that was really hard for me. It was really cool to see that she was, succeeding and doing well, and she was working hard, and still having like a very nice, positive attitude. So yeah, that I would say she's the one I probably know the best of like the rest of the team.
Who are some of the teammates that you look up to, and who are some of the people in the rowing that you look up to?
I think teammate wise, I think we don't have a ton of interaction with each other, so I don't want to mislead you with my answer. I don't necessarily have a teammate who I would look up to. I think I really appreciate, Blake Haxton and his efforts of being a multi-sport athlete in Tokyo. He did the para canoe plus rowing, and he has an incredible story. And so I just appreciate his, constant hard work, and he's very sweet as well. On the senior team side, I think Megan is an incredible human. She's always was the first, like we would train together often at the same location, Chula Vista, the US OPC Training Center. And she was one of the first always to say hi, as was Caitlin, the coxswain. And, we would, trade conversations here and there. So I think really the people, especially considering when I think of like the senior team, anybody really who would just reach out and treat us as equals and human is somebody I don't necessarily look up to, but I definitely respect, because it's definitely a world of, the world is geared towards able-bodied, and I remember the first few years feeling like they didn't appreciate us. It's not like people in particular, just like the senior team as a whole. But like Megan and Caitlin were different. They always stood out to me as like, cool, you're here, I'm here, we're doing the same thing.
What is it like, obviously, getting to live out your Paralympic dream and making it to 2 Paralympics throughout your career?
It's still a bit, mind blowing to be like, oh, it's been 2. It's also, there was a bit of frustration because Tokyo didn't pan out the way that we would have hoped, and there were a lot of reasons behind it that aren't necessarily worth getting into right now. But I still feel like I'm still going. I switched sports, and I'm like, I might make it to 2024, might not, but I'm definitely aiming for the home games in LA 2028, and like it's not over. Like I still have the fire.
What are some of your future plans when looking at your rowing career?
So right after Tokyo, which was basically September 2021 when we got home, in October 2021, I got into a very bad bike accident where I had a triple pelvic fracture. And the short version is rowing wasn't going to be possible anymore on a lot of levels. The rehab is still ongoing. So I'm not really sure I will dip back into rowing, especially given how my injury was received by US Rowing and my coach at the time. It was not pleasant. So I'm not sure I'll compete on the water again at that level. You never know, which is why I'm not going to say never. But I think I'm more transitioning to other sports now.
Of course, what are some of your future plans in your life outside of rowing?
So I'm really big into wheelchair tennis now. Tennis was a big sport for me growing up, and I didn't know wheelchair tennis was an option. And I kind of, started to learn about it and be interested in it around 2019, but that was obviously conflicting because I'm training for Tokyo too. So I would say once I got back from Tokyo, I started training a little bit for it, and then had that accident. So it's been about a year that I've been training seriously for it, and I competed in a bunch of international events, and I have a world ranking. It's around 50 in tennis right now, and I've just finished. I was just at a local tournament this weekend, and it was co-ed just based on there not being like anyone signing up in the women's category for my level, and I was able to win the tournament against the guys. So I feel like that's where I'm currently headed. I'm also on a wheelchair basketball team with Angel City Sports, their first team they've taken on. I think we're the only women's team in California, women's and non-binary, etc. We might be the only one in California right now. So that's those are my 2 sports right now, and I'm sure I'll be adding to my repertoire because I'm kind of obsessed with sports.
Of course, what advice would you give those athletes that are looking to compete in adaptive sports?
Go for it. You have a chance. If you put in the work, you have a chance. It might be harder to find a coach. In all sports, I find that as a challenge. It's kind of like if there's a will, there's a way. You can figure it out.
What advice would you give those people that are looking to go to the Paralympics and compete nationally for Team USA or Canada?
Who are looking to coach? Could you say that again?
What advice would you give people looking to compete nationally on the Team USA and Canada going to the Paralympics?
Keep working hard. go contact there's probably somebody who's on the fitness team. Contact them, get the workouts that the national team is doing if you can, and do those on the erg. That's the rowing machine. Contact other athletes. A lot of athletes, like, I'm willing whenever to be contacted, talk about, help athletes, get into a sport, find what is it called, like gateway to gold sort of events. That's where you can get discovered. You can potentially be meeting some of the high level coaches, watch YouTube videos, watch races, video your own training. So like a key thing that I didn't know I was doing for a while because I wasn't in front of a mirror. That's another thing. If you can erg in front of a mirror, good, like you can check your form, but I hadn't been doing that. So if you can video yourself, if you don't have a mirror, video yourself, check your form, change it early on, because it's a lot harder to change, bad habits later on. These are all sorts of advice.
What advice would you give those Paralympians and even Olympians competing in multiple Olympics and Paralympics?
Not so much advice, just keep going. Like, great job, congratulations.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
I'm mainly on Instagram at Goodkind. That's my last name. So it's Goodkind Vibes.
Thank you again, Lauren Goodkind, for your interview, and best of luck in your future as a U.S. Paralympian para rower.
Yeah, just so you know, Laura.
Thank you again, Laura, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Laura Goodkind, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thank you very much, Brandon.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.